In this lesson, we're going to talk about evaluating algebraic expressions. And this is going to be important because you need to know this in order to graph a function, which is what we're moving to. So here's an example of an algebraic expression, a very simple one. It's 12x minus 18. Algebraic expressions have numbers and they have variables and mathematical operations, and they're made up of these things called terms. This one has two terms. It has a 12x and then an 18. You can tell something's a term because they're usually separated by addition or subtraction. Now, this term here, the variable term, is very important. And the number 12 to this variable term is called a coefficient. So if you ever hear me talk about something called a coefficient, it's the numeric factor of a term. Okay? Now, let's talk about evaluating them. Okay, evaluating them means I am going to give you a numeric value for the variable, and I'm going to give you an expression. So for example, 3x squared minus 4. So if I ask you to evaluate, or if we're going to be evaluating 3x squared minus 4 for the x values that are -1, 0, and 1, what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to, one at a time, plug in these three numbers into this expression and evaluate it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my expression. I have 3x squared minus 4, and I want to plug in the numbers -1, 0, and 1. So I'm going to start for x equals -1. Now, if you're not careful, you can make the most missed thing in Algebra 1. In order to avoid that, what you should do is whenever you substitute in the value for the variable, you should just go ahead and put it in parentheses. So when I plug in -1, I'm going to write the 3, and I'm going to open up the parentheses. And x is going to be replaced with -1. And then I'm going to put the square on the outside. And then I'm going to subtract off 4. Now this becomes an order of operations problem, so I have to take -1 and I square it. And I get a +1, multiply it by 3, subtract 4, follow the order of operations. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 4 gives me -1. So this expression's value at -1 happens to be -1. So let's look at it for 0. So for x equals 0, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and I'm going to be consistent. Every time I replace the x, I'm going to put the number inside of parentheses. So I have 3, open up some parentheses, put the 0 in, close parentheses, and then square it, and then subtract off 4. Once again, I have another order of operations problem. 0 squared is 0, times 3 minus 4. 3 times 0 is 0, minus 4, which gives me -4. So when x is 0, my evaluated expression turns out to be -4. Okay, so I'm going to do this for x equals 1. So I plug in 1, once again, I see I'm going to replace the x with the 1, so inside parentheses, I'm going to put a 1, I'm going to square it, subtract off 4. So then 3 times 1 squared is 3 times 1 minus 4, which gives me 3 minus 4, or -1. All right, so let's look at another example. And just to make sure that you see that you should put these in parentheses, okay? And if you don't, bad things will happen. All right, so let's look at the opposite of x to the 4th plus 10 for the values of x are -2 and 2. So now this negative sign stays there. So when I plug in -2, I get the negative sign. Now I'm going to literally just replace the x with the -2. Then I'm going to put the exponent of 4 and then the plus 10. Now I have to figure out what -2 to the 4th power is. And it's going to be positive. 2, 4, 8, 16. So I have the negative sign there, a positive 16, and a plus 10, which gives me -6. Okay. And if I do the same thing for x equals 2, negative sign outside, 2 in parentheses, 4 plus 10. Well, 2 to the 4th power is a positive 16. Negative sign on the outside, plus 10, gives me -6. So now let's look at another example. So let's look at this one. Let's say xy cubed plus 5 for x equals 2 and y equals -1. All right, so for this one, I have two values to plug in, so I'm going to do the exact same thing. Wherever I see an x, I'm going to open up the parentheses, plug in whatever value that is. In this case, it's just a 2. Now for the y squared, same thing. I'm going to literally only replace the y with the number in parentheses -1 and put the square on the outside, because this is asking you to square the value of y, and y in this case is -1. And how do we write -1 quantity squared? Well, inside parentheses like this. Then I'm going to add the 5, and so now I evaluate -1 squared is +1. Bring down the times 2 and the plus 5. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 5 is 7. And that's how we evaluate algebraic expressions.